This summer, my friends Alex and Ben decided to rent a hunting cabin in the woods. Early in the morning, we packed our bags and headed to the cabin. The drive was long, and Ben and Alex decided to take a nap while I took the wheel. About 2 hours later, I turned onto the road leading directly to our cabin. The road was terrible, full of potholes, and the bumpy ride woke up Alex and Ben. They started talking about what animals they might catch in the forest, where to set traps, and so on. Personally, I wasn't interested in hunting for trophies or fresh meat. I was drawn to the beauty of the place. I'm an amateur photographer and run an online journal where I share my photos. After driving another 40 kilometers, we started to wonder if we had taken the right turn. We pulled out the map and confirmed we were on the right track, with a gas station 5 kilometers ahead. A couple of kilometers later, we saw a billboard for Harry's Diner. It was already around 5 in the evening, so we decided to stop for a bite. When we pulled up to the diner, Alex and Ben were surprised to see a wild wolf on a chain instead of a guard dog. I grabbed my camera and decided to photograph the diner and the wolf on the chain. Inside the diner, we sat down, and a waitress came over to take our order. We ordered 3 business lunches. Apart from us, there was an elderly woman sitting in the diner. Honestly, she looked like a witch. She wore a black moth-eaten cloak, had warts on her hands, and her right eye was a glass eye. She noticed me looking at her, turned towards our table, and started laughing mockingly. She then took out her glass eye and began licking it, all while laughing and looking our way. Ben grabbed my camera and shouted, "Smile for the camera, sister," and snapped a picture of her. After Ben took her picture, her expression began to change. She started baring her teeth, clenching her fists, and I saw blood dripping from her hands. Oh my God, I thought. She got up and, shuffling her feet, approached our table, pulled out her glass eye, and threw it on our table. The eye shattered into tiny pieces. I looked into her eyes, and they were filled with blood from rage. She said, "Blessed sinners, Judgment Day has come," and walked away. We sat at the table for another couple of minutes, each of us lost in our own thoughts. We were all wondering if she had cursed us. As we left the diner, I looked up at the sky and saw dark clouds and flashes of lightning. The wolf chained outside began to howl. I immediately remembered what my grandmother used to say: wolves howl only for the dead getting behind the wheel. We drove on, trying to forget about the strange old woman. About 15 minutes later, a thunderstorm began. I tried to find a radio station to distract myself from the creepy thoughts. We found one station, barely coming through since we were deep in the woods, and the signal was weak. The clouds had covered the entire sky, and it was eerily dark. I turned on the headlights and glanced at the back seat. Alex and Ben were asleep again. A smile crossed my face as I thought, how do they expect to hunt if they keep falling asleep? Turning my head back to the road, I saw the old woman standing right in the middle of it. I slammed on the brakes, and Alex and Ben were jolted awake, hitting the front seats. Alex shouted, "What are you doing?" with a trembling voice. I replied. Look ahead. They both looked forward and couldn't believe their eyes. The old woman from the diner was standing on the road. How could she have gotten here so quickly? I got out of the car and said, "We're sorry for that foolish incident at the diner." She looked at me with surprised eyes and started walking towards me, laughing mockingly. I stood frozen, too scared to say anything. She reached me and slapped me hard across the face. The blow was so strong that I fell onto the asphalt. Alex and Ben, watching from the car, quickly jumped out. Alex rushed to help me up, while Ben started yelling obscenities at the old woman. She looked at Ben and laughed, and then he shouted, "Stop laughing, you crazy old hag. You could have killed my friend." Her face changed again, just like in the diner. I knew this was not a good sign. Her eyes filled with blood from rage, and she opened her mouth, releasing a swarm of bees. The bees swarmed around Ben, and he screamed for help. I couldn't believe my eyes. She closed her mouth, threw her head back, and laughed loudly. Ben collapsed to the ground, unmoving. I realized he was dead. Alex and I ran back to the car and locked ourselves in. We were in a state of absolute panic. How was this even possible? I looked out the windows but couldn't see the old woman. My heart was pounding wildly. Alex started searching through the bags for a phone to call for help. I moved to the front seat, ready to drive us away from there. Suddenly, the old woman appeared in front of the car again. She was holding the car keys, waving them, and laughing. I told Alex to look. He stared at the old woman, tears streaming down his face. Then, to my horror, I saw Alex's face beginning to melt like ice. I shouted, "Your face!" He touched his face with his hand, and his skin stuck to his palms. As he pulled his hands away, his skin stretched like rubber. I watched in horror, tears streaming from my eyes, realizing we were facing a torturous death. Foam started coming out of Alex's mouth. In a hoarse, barely audible voice, he said, "Help me." In the next moment, Alex collapsed onto the floor. I turned my head to the passenger seat next to me and screamed. The old woman was sitting there. I was paralyzed. My arms and legs refused to move. She touched me, and my vision started to darken. I lost consciousness. I woke up the next morning near that diner. It felt like I had been beaten all night. Entering the diner, I saw the old woman. She looked at me and laughed loudly. My mind was racing. What had happened? Where were Alex and Ben? Were they still alive? The memories of the previous night flooded back, making me shiver with fear. Trying to gather my thoughts, I stumbled outside, desperately needing to understand what was real and what was not. I checked my phone for any sign of reception, but there was none. The diner, the storm, the old woman, everything seemed like a twisted nightmare. But the pain in my body was real. I knew I had to find Alex and Ben, or at least find some help. I took a deep breath and decided to head back to the car. As I approached it, I noticed it was unlocked. Inside, the seats were stained with blood and something sticky, remnants of the horrors from last night. Frantically searching, I found no trace of Alex or Ben. The realization hit me hard. I was alone. Returning to the diner, I approached the old woman cautiously. "What did you do to my friends?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She stopped laughing and fixed her blood-red eyes on me. "They have been judged," she said coldly. "And now it's your turn." Before I could react, she raised her hand, and a blinding light enveloped me. I felt myself being pulled into darkness, my body racked with pain. Then, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the ground in the middle of the forest. The car, the diner, the old woman, all were gone. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant howling of wolves. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented and weak. In the distance, I saw a figure approaching. As it got closer, I realized it was a park ranger. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out. I nodded weakly, unable to find my voice. He helped me to his truck and gave me some water. "What happened to you?" he asked. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Everything seemed like a blur. "Don't worry," he said kindly. "We'll get you to a hospital and figure this out." As we drove away, I glanced back at the forest, the memory of the old woman's laugh still haunting me. I knew I had survived something unexplainable, but the scars, both physical and mental, would stay with me forever.